Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, thank you so much for being here. This show is brand new. I am realizing that I have made a cardinal sin of broadcasting. I am not the most powerful Pete on my own show.
No, you're not, but you're the most powerful Pete at the Fox News channel.
Okay.
That wasn't the case before. Now it is.
They will fact check that. So this week, the big event at Quantico was all about readiness.
Yeah.
And as the admirals and the generals were taking that message back to their troops, the government shut down. How does a government shutdown impact readiness?
Well, of course it does. You got to pay for the stuff you're doing. We're going to do the job no matter what. The Navy and the Air Force, that's the game we're at here today. They're going to do their job. They're going to defend the nation. We're going to continue training. But eventually you stop paying people. You stop doing things. You stop training. You're less ready. You're less capable of being mission ready. You can't maintain everything. So, yeah, I mean, we're dealing with a Chuck Schumer special right now. This is the vanity of one man who doesn't want to look weak to his base. And so he's trying to look tough, throw $1.5 trillion on top of what is otherwise a clean bill to fund the government, to move along on a regular order. And so we're going to fight through it. But it's unfortunate that the Democrats are pushing politics into something when all we want to do is defend the nation, and we're going to keep doing it.
And your agency is as affected as any. During a government shutdown, how hard is it to keep up this warrior ethos you talked about this week when the warriors don't know when their next paycheck is coming?
Pretty soon they're going to start looking at leaders, looking at Democrats, saying, how long are you going to hold out? Because pretty soon I won't have a paycheck. Pretty soon I can't use that paycheck to pay for the groceries for my family and live my life. You know, joining the military is not a lucrative business. The generals that were in that room with us aren't in this to get rich. They can make a lot more on the outside, just like the sergeants and the captains and the others who serve. It's not about the money, but at the end of the day, you got to pay the bills. And so when dumb games are played by Democrats on Capitol Hill, they don't have the power, they don't have the control. Chuck Schumer's doing this to protect his own base because he wants to keep his position. It's nonsense. End it, fund it, and let the troops get back to what they do best, which is defend the nation.
Something else the troops have been doing, the Department of War has been deploying National Guardsmen to dangerous downtowns throughout this country. If a young man or woman signs up today, are they more likely to deploy in their career to the Middle East or to the Midwest?
Well, I'll tell you this, the era of sort of reckless adventurism around the globe is over. We're introducing, President Trump is, clear missions, clear end states. I mean, even the renaming of the department from the Department of Defense to the Department of War is about clarity. We're not interested in endless, unclear missions. You go to war decisively with a clear mission to win it and then come home. So you're not going to see nation building abroad. In that sense, they're less likely. Also, President Trump's willing to stand alongside law enforcement and make sure they're safe in the conduct of their duties. So in that sense, they're more likely. But we're here to defend the hemisphere, defend the homeland, defend the border, deter China, make sure Europe shoulders more of the burden. So I don't know exactly where everybody will be, but I'll tell you, we're going to be laser focused on America first and peace through strength, and that's what President Trump delivers.
And so then based on your answer about no more foreign entanglements, endless entanglements, the way that you see it right now at the Department of War, which would be the greatest threat to the U.S. homeland? China, Russia, or Antifa?
Well, depends on where you are, right? I mean, ultimately, looks like Navy just scored.
They like that answer. They like that answer a lot.
I think they vote for defending the homeland. Ultimately, we're going to defend the homeland first. That's most important. The invasion of our southern border, what Joe Biden unleashed, is a sin. It's a sin. And we're undoing it by locking down the border and supporting mass deportations. Not knowing who's in your country when they're not citizens is dangerous. You name it, whether it's Antifa, whether it's cartels, foreign terrorist organizations, whether it's Iranians, you name it, Islamists, you can't have it. So we're locking that down while at the same time ensuring we have the kind of power projection posture. That's why President Trump spent $1 trillion, and we're going to spend even more, so that we can project power. Our ship is capable of doing that. Our Air Force is capable of doing that, so that our adversaries far away don't feel like they can move into our hemisphere and threaten us here. So there are a lot of threats. Defending the homeland is first and foremost, and we're going to be a part of all spectrums of that.
You mentioned cartels and foreign terrorist organizations. Let's start there. The big news this weekend, a possible peace process progress in Gaza. If the Hamas peace talks go sideways, is there a universe where the Department of War would move in to assist Israel either by air or by sea?
No, President Trump's been clear. Israel's got this. If this falls apart and Hamas doesn't live up to its word, which it oftentimes, as we know, does not, then Israel can finish the job. Israel can go in there and make sure Hamas is obliterated. But President Trump creates opportunities where no other leader can. Moves the Overton window and creates an art of the possible for real peace in the Middle East. I mean, if Hamas can live up to it, step up to the moment, then it looks like we're on the precipice of something really different in the Middle East, which creates a whole different set of possibilities. So we're proud to be a part of supporting and defending Israel, but when it comes to Hamas, they've got it.
You have said the strikes will continue against narco-terrorists. Every video of a cartel boat blowing up looks like it is a trailer for a Bad Boys movie sequel. But how is that legal?
Oh, we have every authorization needed. These are designated as foreign terrorist organizations. They're a threat to the homeland. They're a threat to the American people. They've been poisoning our people for far too long. And President Trump said no more. They're effectively designated just like Al-Qaeda, which if I saw Al-Qaeda in the conduct of doing something that was going to threaten and kill Americans, I had the right to do that in Iraq and Afghanistan. If you're in our hemisphere and you're in the Caribbean, if you're north of Venezuela and you want to traffic drugs to the United States, you are a legitimate target of the United States military. And in each one of these strikes, we know where they're coming from. We know who they work for. We know where they're going. We know what they're carrying. We know how many people are on that boat. And that's why these are legitimate, clean kills in pursuit of defending the homeland. And we hope it deters those foreign terrorist organizations from doing it, because the American people deserve to be defended.
And in reading the criticism from Capitol Hill the last couple days about this, it reminds me of your time serving the country at Guantanamo Bay. You were surrounded by terrorists who waited for years for a trial because that's the way that the system was set up. So it seems like these folks on Capitol Hill are curious why those terrorists get trials and these narco-terrorists don't before a bomb falls on their boat.
Peter, you know there's a lot of terrorists in the Middle East and elsewhere who never got a trial. And thank goodness, because they're dead. Because we hunted them down, we found them, and we killed them. And just like we were focused on Al-Qaeda and ISIS, and we still are, we're making sure in various places around the world that they're never spending one night assured of their own survival. If you're in the drug trafficking business, if you're in foreign terrorist organization poisoning the American people in the maritime domain or anywhere, you could be under target from the United States. And we're going to make sure our people, our homeland, our citizens are defended. We have allowed people to be poisoned for far too long with impunity. That ends. And so we're willing to conduct the operations we are, and we think it's going to have a great deal of effect.
For those keeping score at home, during the course of our interview, 2 touchdowns were scored behind us. Navy wound up winning 34-31, but we actually went into overtime with the Secretary of War. And next, you're going to hear about how he plans to protect America's secrets in a Washington that loves to leak. You inherited a whole huge department. Hundreds of thousands of people work there. The people in your part of the Pentagon, do you trust them? This is cool. This is a rare live picture aboard the USS George H.W. Bush off the coast of Norfolk, Virginia. President Trump is visiting Virginia today to say happy 250th birthday to the U.S. Navy. He will be joined by the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, who joins us exclusively again right now from the sidelines of the Navy Air Force game in Annapolis to talk about ways he plans to keep military secrets secret. How big of a problem are leaks coming out of the Pentagon?
Well, obviously they're not helpful. They're not legal. If someone's handing over or providing information that is classified or otherwise not for disclosure, that's a problem. So we're doing everything we can protocol-wise to make sure that those are minimized. And unfortunately, we live in an era where people do things like that. Journalists solicit things like that, which I think is disgusting. When journalists are saying, hey, send us classified information. That's why we have a policy at the Pentagon around what kind of conduct journalists will have in the building, too. We take these things very seriously, and leaks are a problem. We're going to try to address them.
And would you start using polygraphs to stop the leaks?
I think we'll use whatever tools we need, ultimately, especially with our own service members who can never be party to that, or our own civilians who can never be party to leaking. We're setting clear rules at the Pentagon. We're not playing games. We're not allowing everybody to roam around the building. You know, that was the policy before, Peter. If you were a Pentagon reporter, you could just walk around the building. No badge, no escort, no nothing. Walk into offices, talk to anybody. Who knows where there's classified information. we're making the rules more like you might say the White House. Can you roam the White House wherever you want?
Typically not without getting a Secret Service guy up in my grill.
So we're just normalizing it. Yes, you can be in the press area, briefing room, but if you want to move around the building, you're going to have a badge. It's going to be clear. You're going to be escorted when you do so, and we have expectation that you're not soliciting classified or sensitive information. I think the American people see things like that as absolute common sense. The Pentagon press corps can squeal all they want. We're taking these things seriously. They can report. They just need to make sure they're following rules.
Do you trust you inherited a whole huge department. Hundreds of thousands of people work there. The people in your part of the Pentagon, do you trust them?
Well, I think all those folks that we serve with, uniform and civilians, all raise their right hand to defend the Constitution. They swore an oath. We expect them to uphold that oath. So, of course, we trust them until they give us reason not to believe they're not upholding that constitutional oath. So there's a lot of trust that goes into, I'm not wearing the uniform, I used to, but all these guys around us, all these guys on the field who wear that uniform, that comes with trust. Of course I trust them. I want them to execute to secure our nation until they give us a reason not to. But I tell you, yeah, I gave a speech about how we need to uphold standards and raise standards and do PT and all that. But that's because the vast majority of those who serve our nation are incredible men and women of integrity who will uphold that oath, and I'm proud to be able to speak for them.
Last one. There is an account on X that forecasts or tries to forecast military action based on how busy the pizza places are around the Pentagon. Next time there's going to be an airstrike, have you guys thought about maybe just going to the cafeteria?
I'm aware of that account. I haven't thought of just going to the cafeteria. I've thought of just ordering lots of pizza on random nights, just to throw everybody off. Some Friday night when you see a bunch of Domino's orders, it might just be me on an app throwing the whole system off so we keep everybody off balance. Trust me, we look at every indicator. There's a reason Midnight Hammer worked, because we understood open source, we understood classified ways in which the public and others are trying to watch movements. And in sensitive ways, we controlled for a lot of that in ways that only the U.S. government can do it. I mean, President Trump says this all the time. There's only one military that can do what we do, which is why it's such a solemn responsibility for me to make sure the leaders this military have are leaders they deserve, who uphold the same standards as a 4-star as they would at a private. And actually underreported about that Quantico speech wasn't just generals. It was also senior enlisted leaders, top NCOs, who are the ones that enforce standards. And in fact, a lot of their heads were nodding the most. They're like, yeah, thank you for letting us do our job to make sure our formations are what they should be. Because you remember Giuliani in New York, the broken windows theory of policing? If you don't police the small stuff, if you let the beards go and the bellies go and the uniforms go and the fitness standards go, pretty soon the big stuff goes. Because our whole military is premised on unit cohesion and unity of mission. That's why diversity is our strength. It's such a dumb slogan. It's the dumbest slogan of all time. No, our strength is our unity. It's our clarity. It's the mission we share, love of country, and an understanding that we're in this uniform. I'm looking at folks right over there wearing this uniform. It's a point of pride. It's about doing something greater than yourself to serve the nation when you could do 1,000 other things. We're going to do right by that responsibility. Those men and women are not civilians. They're members of the military. They're in the profession of arms. They live by a code we don't expect civilians to live by. That code is back. And at every echelon, we're going to live by that and lead by that. President Trump has set that tone, and we're going to continue doing it.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.